Okay, so how do we actually start to get people back to, the real stuff here? So how do we get somebody back to the actual, the pressing of kettlebells, the pressing of dumbbells, the pressing to get back to Olympic lifting? And I think there's 4 exercises that Dan and I agree on that we really, really like to work with. Okay, so number one is we do a lot of crawling variations to kind of co-contract the shoulder joint and get dynamic stability, but we also think that it's a phenomenal way to start working on slight overhead elevation. So if I'm in a hands and knees position and I crawl backwards, as I push the floor away on one side, I am elevating up, right? So you think about it, you're elevating your arm up to maybe 130, 140 degrees based on how big your steps are, but you're also co-contracting your cuff by being on hands and knees. So as my arm slowly comes overhead in a reverse bear crawl, I think I'm going to start to groove that pattern of overhead motion, and I'm not going to put too much stress on my shoulder because I can take smaller steps. So we usually start everybody with reverse bear crawls as their first kind of exposure to overhead lifting, even though it's not really looking like we're doing things that are pressing in nature on our, half kneeling or tall kneeling. So we start with reverse bear crawls, and then our next thing here is that the force progression is going to be a little bit higher, right? But also as we work up to a more of a range of motion, a landmine overhead press is going to be a fantastic way to get somebody back to starting it, right? If we do half kneeling landmine presses, we get to maybe 150 degrees of range of motion. We're not going to put somebody in a provocative, range of motion that they're probably a little bit nervous of, but it's going to be a version of strict pressing. Just like we talked about with the kettlebell bottoms up press, if I come up onto one elbow and then go overhead, I'm starting to get up into about 140, 150 degrees of elevation. I'm not going to, maybe put some pinching risk on my cuff or flare some crankiness if my mobility is still coming along, but the progress of reverse bear crawls to landmine pressing is a very good natural progression to get somebody safely and confidently back to loading in a way that you can expose them to, right? Obviously, you can objectively quantify exactly how much weight you're using, right? So eventually it goes reverse bear crawls, landmine overhead press, and then eventually at one point when they feel like their motion's back and they feel comfortable, we just do a very light half kneeling regular press. So half kneeling kettlebell press that you saw in the back we can do. You can do it with a dumbbell if someone feels more comfortable with that, right? And the biggest thing in this parenthesis here is that we really like to see somebody who can have symmetry between the right and the left side before they get back to 2 arms moving together, right? So if the first 2 really get my range of motion to progress back and I start to load in a landmine press, my third one here of a half kneeling press, if I can only landmine press 10 pounds on my involved side, but my other side feels comfortable for a set of 8 to 30 pounds, well, I should probably continue to work on that half kneeling press first before I ever go back to 2 arms at a time or doing a barbell or things like that. So that's how you can see it kind of built in as a range of motion progression here, right? The objective intensity increase here between how much weight I'm using in these 2 exercises. And you can also see somebody who has the right to left symmetry maintained before they start to go super crazy. Okay, so here's some examples here. So just Dan doing some reverse crawls, right? So as he starts here, you can see that his arm is only elevating slightly because he's doing very small steps, right? He is getting backwards motion, but he's not going super, super high. So reverse rolling, he's obviously crawling forward there. Okay, so second would be the landmine press. So as I am in this position, you can see that it's very similar, like this angle of the top right here, right, where his arm's overhead, right? Almost similar to exactly what I'm doing here with the landmine press. Obviously, I'm upright and I'm using more of my forward trunk lean so I can get more of a press through in my serratus. But I know exactly how much force is on the bar. I know exactly where the motion is coming from, and I can feel like I'm objectively quantifying this. So usually step 2, like we said, is our landmine pressing, right? We usually are generally going for 8 to 12 reps because usually people are trying to get more hypertrophy of their cuff and hypertrophy of their shoulder in general. So a couple sets of 8 to 12 based on how the motion feels. Okay, so 3 is going to be what we talked about. It's just half kneeling pressing. So we can do dumbbells, we can do kettlebells. And now, as you can see, Dan is moving into a full elevated position. We're trying to maintain just scapular and glenoid motion instead of kind of cheating with our back. He's got his hips tucked under. He's got a nice flat spine position. That's going to be number 3 that we like to use. And then number 4 here is going to be what we talked about, is just strict dumbbell pressing.